Hello and welcome to the keyboard department of Royal Birmingham Conservatoire. I think what's important to all young musicians at a certain point in their career is to be in an inspiring musical family where they're surrounded by very talented people and they have all sorts of ideas coming at them, they're fully stimulated and engaged, and then they have the facilities with which to work to explore their own artistic development. So, as one of the larger keyboard departments in the UK Conservatoire sector, we offer that sort of extended, inspiring experience. And we try to be at the centre of an international world of musicians here. So that in addition to the faculty that's in every week, we have a masterclass at least once a week, often on a Thursday afternoon, so that as one goes through one's course of study here, one meets many of the leading figures in pianism, certainly in the UK and to some extent also in Europe and the rest of the world.
Our aim here is to develop talent and to help students to achieve performing careers. But also there are many students that find transferable skills going forward into whatever they end up doing to be successful in life.
We have, of course, a world-class faculty. Our international chair, Professor Pascal Nemirovsky, is well known throughout the world, and his class is winning competitions right, left and centre. We recently had a quarter-finalist in Van Cliburn and the winner of Hastings International Concerto Competition and the winner of Birmingham Brant International Competition and Sheep Drove Intercollegiate Piano Competition.
Well, I'm very happy, apart from teaching, and to travel for this fantastic conservatoire. And now I feel that many students, I mean bright students from all over, are very interested in coming, and the faculty is great. I mean, the facilities are amazing, and it's yes, it's. And I've been comparing to many places because I've studied at Juilliard. You know, I go in many places in the world. And the standard here is becoming really high, and it's very exciting.
Birmingham seems to me the best place probably for start your career, because it's quite close. It's in the middle of UK, so it's very comfortable place. And of course, Conservatoire offers a lot of things for young musicians, such as a lot of concerts, such as a lot of festivals, and etc. So we can play, we can have a stage here, and I'm really happy to be here.
So I was actually a student at the Conservatoire. I shan't say how many years ago, it's a long time ago now. So Birmingham has been my home for quite a long time now, and I think we are lucky in Birmingham with the music we have, and also in the Conservatoire, now in our wonderful new building with our amazing facilities and all our performance venues. We have so much music going on.
And I always found from a student's year, the Royal Birmingham Conservatoire has this sense of family atmosphere, I would call it, and everybody is very friendly. If you talk to any of our students, they will tell you about how everybody trying to help you to achieve your full potential.
Part of my responsibility is to make sure that the pianists have performing opportunities, and with a department of over 100, that's not so straightforward. One way is to focus people's preparation on festival projects. This year we're having another International Piano Festival in June. The artistic director is Pascal Nemirovsky, and the guests will include Markus Groh from Berlin, Boris Schlutsky from America, Stephen Huff and Stephen Kovacevic coming up from London, Peter Frankel also coming from London, and an array of young artists who will be playing in masterclasses and giving concerts and competing, and they're coming from all over the world, and I think hearing them play is going to be an enormous treat for us all. So this year we've just announced a very exciting collaboration with Naxos. They have invited us to contribute to some of their complete composer recordings. And 5 pianists will be making their debut disc for Naxos this summer. 3 of them are playing works by Liszt, 1 Scarlatti, and 1 who actually is the former YCAT artist now represented by Asconis Holt, that's Daniel Lebhardt. He will be playing Schubert. Now, of course, it's very exciting when you make your first CD. It's a great calling card and it establishes you in the profession, as does something like live broadcasting for BBC Radio 3. So it was also a great pleasure last year that 4 pianists gave an evening piano showcase recital for BBC Radio 3, and we'll be following that up with future broadcasts for the BBC. We have a large range of competitions, and most of the students see those not so much in the competitive sense but as a performance opportunity. So they're designed to function for particular year groups. We have one for first years, one for first and second years, one for undergraduates, one for postgraduates. The Peter Donohoe Gold Medal, which is the extended recital Premier League competition. Perhaps it's worth saying that Peter Donohoe, CBE, is Vice President of the Conservatoire, the President being Simon Rattle. But Peter lives in Birmingham, and we see a lot of him. He gives recitals during the year, and he gives typically about 5 masterclasses a year. So that is an invaluable resource that we have as part of the town. And the CBSO, of course, is an invaluable resource in terms of the musicians playing in it. They're keen to teach and to work collaboratively, so a lot of them are involved in chamber music. And there's lots of very exciting projects going on with them.
I think one of the exciting thing about our department is all our faculty, they are concert pianists, and they're making album every year, and they are doing lots of concerts on a world stage. So for example, my current project, including one is called Thème de la Chambre, which is feature female composers from 18th century to contemporary. So I just did this concert in the Birmingham Town Hall, and also play live at the BBC Radio 3. My new album, which is featured the same theme, is live play on Classic FM, and also featured by the Gramophone magazine and Classical Music magazine next month. And in May, I'm going to take this project to China and tour across 8 cities. So I think we have the first hand information about how to perform, how to conquer your nerve, and to pass that very freshly to our students. And I think that's one of the great news being part of the piano department.
One of the things I enjoy a lot is teaching, because there's something very special going on when you're exploring a piece of music and someone's appreciating what you're showing, or you're discovering things together. And also, of course, one feels useful because that's the next generation coming through. I also always enjoy any contact with the greatest of musicians. So in my case, if I'm making chamber music with the greatest of players today, that's always a joy. I enjoy giving concerts and travelling to do that. And I do also, not everybody enjoys making recordings, but I do very much enjoy the process of making recording. I suppose in a way it's like if you're trying to write a book or something, you're trying to leave something behind which is as good as you can make it. And the process of doing that, going through the process of making multiple takes, understanding at the time what needs correcting, listening back, negotiating with colleagues, which is always part of what I'm doing, if I'm making chamber music recordings, and also being reasonably involved in the editing process and thrashing that out, which again can be complicated where colleagues are involved. Recently I was able to say, why is it that this bar I don't play any of the right notes? And the person said, well, because the string playing sounds nice there. And I say, yeah, well, okay, the string playing sounds nice, but you can't have a recording going out where the pianist doesn't have any of the right notes in the whole bar. So that was easy to negotiate because everybody agreed we should put in a take where I played the right notes. But sometimes it's much more complicated than that. But once you've lived through all that process, which can be very time-consuming and very frustrating, when you then have something that you're proud of, which has happened to me with the Primrose Piano Quartet, and also in the recordings that I've made with Alexander Bailey, for example, of British cello sonatas, then that's a very satisfying part of my work. It was always clear to me that I loved music, and for example, I sang in the local cathedral for a while, where I grew up in St Albans. I had a nice treble voice, which if you're interested, you can still find on YouTube. Once when I was, I don't know, 12 or something, I made a recording late at night in the cathedral of a piece by William Boyce called Tell Me Lovely Shepherd. If I'm honest, the breath control isn't what I would most wish for, and I forget one of the words at the end. But the voice has got something. So I was there singing and learning to play the piano, and from an early stage I enjoyed chamber music, playing with the other musicians in my school. And that's just as well, because that's been a feature of my life going forward. I'm now a member of the Primrose Piano Quartet, and we've just released a Brahms box set of recordings made in Vienna on historic instruments. So that feeds into our appreciation of historically informed performance style, and that was favourably reviewed in Record Review by Andrew McGregor a few weeks ago, and we're expecting a BBC Music magazine in the April issue review. The other thing I've done all my life is play for cellists, and this is a result in a way of another accident. It's interesting how people's lives are sometimes design and sometimes accident. I grew up immediately opposite Alexander Bailey, who is widely regarded as one of the very finest British cellists of his generation. So he was 5 years older than me, and at a certain point in my sixth form I would go over and we'd play through concertos and so forth. And then when I was coming to the end of my undergraduate years, where I did joint course in Manchester, I went to the university and the Royal Northern, we started giving concerts. And I remember Sandy saying to me that what one really needs, apart from wonderful teaching and working hard, is experience and opportunity in whatever way one can find it to be actually playing for people and making music. So in my case, I was very lucky to be invited to give some concerts with Sandy. I also did, there was at that time a Northwest Arts Young Performers platform, which I won with the famous double bassist Leon Bosch. And then I also did things like Live Music Now, where you go around and play to old people's homes and day centres and all that. And I was a founder member of the Music Group of Manchester when I was Manchester based, which was a chamber group, which became very popular in the music clubs, particularly of that area. So everyone finds a way, and when one has to survive in the profession, keep working, keep improving, and then make the most of opportunities that come one's way, and also make one's own luck in whatever way is possible. Now, if one's route is solo pianism, then it's hard to argue with winning a major competition, because that does get one noticed and it does give one opportunities. And it's rather nice that that is done mostly as fairly as it can be. If you present yourself as a great artiste of the keyboard, then you've got a chance to be noticed at these competitions. I think it's slightly different in the pop world these days. There are lots of different sorts of music, just like there are lots of different sorts of people. There's some music which is more abstract, some music that favours a scientific approach or a mathematical approach, but most music is focused in the emotional life of the human being, and so links to the other arts in their exploration of what it means to be a human being and to our everyday experiences of life. And we learn to see how composers over the centuries have tried to tell us something about their lives or different experiences or different characters in music, and we find how to bring those characters alive at the keyboard. And that's quite an extensive process. I don't personally think music is a language, because you can't translate in and out of it. But it certainly is a means of very powerful communication, and the more time you spend with it, the more you understand and the more it means to you. And I would say it's not unimportant, if one wants to make a career out of music, that one's passionate enough about it for it to be the focus in your life. Now, what do we need to understand as we play it? We need to understand the character of the music we're playing, and we need to understand it not in a simplistic way, or not just in a simplistic way, but in a very detailed and precise way, so that we learn to inhabit the character in the most vivacious or affecting way possible, and to communicate that through mastery of our particular instrument. And we're very lucky as pianists that we have an instrument with an enormous resource and also a very interesting history. And we're blessed in this conservatoire with a good fleet of modern Steinways, but also with some historic instruments. So, for example, Clara Schumann's cousin, who was called Wilhelm Wieck, he made a piano in the 1850s that we have here, and that can help us begin to look at how the pianos of the 19th century sounded. We do also explore difference in approaches to interpretation at the piano. For example, asynchronicity of the hands, arpeggiation, a freer approach agogically to the way rhythms are handled. These are all things which were arguably more free in the 19th century, which were lost a little bit at some point in the 20th century, and which here we are in the 21st century reconnecting to these great traditions of human music making. Of course, music has to mean something to you. Now, it will mean more to you the more you study it. The older one gets, the more music means. And this is rather a nice thing as I'm now getting older. I find the older I get, the more music means to me. And if some things can be expected to deteriorate, I'm hoping that my appreciation and understanding of music will only grow. Because this is the process of learning about music, which is why it's very important to have a very wide knowledge of music, all styles, all genre, not just piano music, because everything feeds into understanding of music. But generally speaking, one might say that one of the interesting things about musicians is that they're often people that could have done other careers. They could have gone off and been doctors or lawyers because they have a certain aptitude, intelligence, as well as an artistic feeling for things. We know that music unites all the different parts of the brain. That's one of the reasons why it's very good for children to learn music. So in another sense, of course, it's demanding of every aspect of one's personality. So to have a rounded and generally capable personality is one of the things you need, and that means that you could have gone off and been a lawyer or a medic or a politician. So why did we do music? We know we're going to, by and large, be less well paid, but we hope that we are drawn closer to one of the world's greatest artistic traditions, which music certainly is, and also, by and large, we enjoy the company of other musicians who are other capable and wonderful people who have been drawn likewise to this great art form. So we can expect that our day-to-day work is with an incredible raw material, which is the masterworks that the greatest composers have written over time, and that we will enjoy the company of colleagues. And hopefully over time we'll also find a way to put a roof over our heads. So one of the things that we spend a lot of time discussing is how best to practice. And I've often thought that we could do worse than invite every member of the faculty to come up with some of the ways that they practice and make up a little book which might be of wider value to students everywhere, because it's not written about and discussed quite as much as it might be. So let's just talk about a few very simple things, but it's only scratching the surface of what is an enormous field. Harriet Cohen, who was Sir Arnold Bax's mistress, she wrote her autobiography, A Bundle of Time, and she talks about meeting Rachmaninoff and him carrying a little pocket metronome in his pocket, and she asked him why. And he said, well, when I'm learning a piece, I start off very slowly, and very gradually I'll get up to speed. This is not so stupid. To have the discipline of a metronome which stops you rushing in the difficult bits or slackening the tempo in lyrical bits or whatever it is, as a basic friend in the room, you can think of it, putting everything in place slowly and increasing the tempo. That is one very simplistic way to start the whole process of practicing, which works. Another way, of course, is to look at each hand separately, because we have two hands. If you divide your attention in that way, you can make more progress with one hand and then unite them. The difficulty being, of course, that when you put your two hands together, it's never going to be quite the same as when they were separate, because they involve each other in a complicated way. But nonetheless, that's a good way to practice. Pianists are very fond of using all sorts of funny rhythms. That could be a very good way to get patterns firmly established in the brain and also to build up evenness. Now, finger evenness is something that we're all very concerned about. We can use all manner of exercises, including finger exercises, the famous Hanon exercises, Brahms exercises and so forth, all of which is worth doing, but we could also work at those issues within music. Then it always occurred to me when I was teaching in schools, and I would look at what students had to do in terms of scales and arpeggios, and I was thinking to myself, well, wouldn't it be interesting to add in a pedal exercise or maybe a balance exercise? Because at a certain point, actually from the very beginning, one needs to think about how one's balancing notes between hands or within the hand, and that skill of bringing out different parts clearly and in a shaped, phrased way is something we all need to think about from the very beginning and to be challenging ourselves to do better. Then there's the whole issue of how you make sound and what sorts of sounds. And there are all sorts of areas in piano technique which are still slightly, people come at it from different views, just as they do, for example, how to sit. I like to sit low, but I readily concede that some of the great pianists in the world sit high. Similarly, some people like to draw the sound towards them in this way. Other people prefer to ping the sound out in this way. Now these things are not necessarily contradictory. If you add to the overall quality of the range of sounds that you can create, that's all positive. In terms of articulation, we know that a lot of music, rock and classical music, can benefit from all sorts of non-legato touches. We also know that conversely, singing a melody often benefits from a super legato, legatissimo, where the notes are slightly overlapped. We also know that in general, sound is better if the bigger levers are employed. So if you're playing a single key, if you're playing at the front of the key, that's better than if you're playing halfway down the key. If you can use bigger levers in terms of things like forearm rotation, that improves the sound a lot as well. So at a simple level, you can think that when you're moving up in pitch, you can use a clockwise forearm rotation, and when you're moving down in pitch, you can use an anti-clockwise forearm rotation. And if you build all these rotations, as well as things like circling the hand when the semiquavers or whatever it is has a certain shape, these sorts of movements are all part of bringing a bigger lever, which is ultimately the whole arm, into play, which means that you don't over-demand the fingers and you have a freer and bigger and warmer and richer sound as a result. And the more we've moved in history towards the big concert grand Steinways, the more that has of course been relevant, because when you go right back to the very early days, they had a completely different idea that you could put a coin on your hand and it should remain motionless while your fingers did the work. That's the exact opposite of how we now think about piano technique, more or less. So let's have a quick word about performance anxiety. Whenever we have somebody in to talk about that, as we did at the beginning of this year when Charlotte Tomlinson came up from Oxford University, it always strikes a chord with the students, and it becomes apparent that this is something they're very concerned about and they think a lot about, and that we need to talk about, and that if we talk about it honestly and openly, everyone seems to benefit. Because of course it's a very natural thing on all sorts of levels. At the most basic level, it's when you stand up and try to sit down and try to play the piano in public, if you don't know what you're doing and you have some awareness of the extent to which you don't know what you're doing, that's a difficult and embarrassing process. So one aspect of overcoming this is simply becoming aware of the degree to which one has to be prepared before one presents. In other words, however good you are at overcoming your anxiety, if you haven't done the background work to what you're doing, it's not going to go so well. But beyond that, of course, if you feel completely positive about the way you share what you feel about music with people in an uninhibited and giving and generous way, then that is going to be the best way in which to perform. And to do that involves feeling comfortable in what you have to say as you say it, and not being constricted or shy or terrified or whatever it is. And this does involve a whole very complex series of things about which there is now a whole profession set up. But one of the things we know is that the more people do it, the better they get at it. So that goes back to the importance of performance opportunities. The worst thing is if you spend the whole year practicing away and then everything rests on your final recital, and that's the first time you've played it to anyone other than your teacher. So the more you do, the easier it becomes. And at a certain point, some people speak sometimes of being extremely blasé about performing, or not even be able to raise the necessary adrenaline or excitement to perform. But that's not the case with most students. Most students have almost too much adrenaline and are over anxious about the situation. And of course, in truth, they are often being marked, which is also very unfortunate, because the aspect of being judged in that sense isn't the best way to think about performing. The best way to think about performing is that one spent a lot of time with the piece, you love the piece, you found out what you want to show in it, and then you want to give that generously. And what anybody thinks about it in terms of marking shouldn't really enter your head. So that's why it's nice if students are giving concerts and not just playing exams. A concert situation where it's all about positive reinforcement is invaluable, as is playing outside the conservatoire, where the nitty-gritty of everyday conservatoire life can be forgotten and the punters are there just wanting to enjoy the music. That is hugely positive. And of course we do go out into local churches and halls and community centres all around the West Midlands to a considerable degree. So away from music, what do? I used to really enjoy walking in the hills. I still do something of that. The Lake District was a place I used to go a lot. I used to sail sometimes. I still do a little bit of that. I enjoy reading, of course, and I think I probably share in common, as one gets older, moving slightly more from fiction to non-fiction. And then also I love watching films, including old films, black and white movies. I think there is some sense in which the drama of something, for example, like opera, which I love going to the opera. Some of the great films have an operatic sweep and dramatic intensity, and also human intensity to them, which I get a lot of enjoyment from watching.